Joshua had to leave. He was in line to be next. So I'm going to read his question. My question is, we only experience and observe things from our own perspective. As far as we truly know, nothing exists outside of us. All we can say for sure is that we're having an experience. Even if we were to experience things as someone else through a dream or sudden shift in consciousness positioning, it is still that first person perspective. How is consciousness constrained in this way? And is this constraint some sort of recursive illusion?
That's kind of is on the edge of what's called the solipsism. And that is that, every individual is the center of their own universe, basically. And that you're the only person in your world. I think that's probably a dysfunctional interpretation of things. I don't think that, because everything, our reality is our interpretation of the data. Okay. It's our interpretation of the data. It's not necessarily what's out there. There's really nothing out there. There's just information. So our interpretation of the data does not mean that, we're at the center of our own universe and everything else is just in our mind. The data comes from somewhere else. Now, maybe they think that they're making up all the data, that they are the source of the data that they're interpreting, but that's not the case. That truly would be somebody who was, everybody would be an individual in their, at the center of their own universe. But the data comes from outside of you. And part of the way we know that is because we live in a multiplayer game. Or we're working now, we're experiencing in a multiplayer game. There's lots of people interacting here with us. We affect them, they affect us. And we're all getting data streams. We're all interpreting our own reality. We all live in our own reality, but we're all interacting. And that interaction is a real thing. And those other people are real, independent, individuated units of consciousness. So I don't see it. I've never found a much redeeming value, I guess, in the idea that we are the creator of all of our reality. We are the creator of our interpretation, and that interpretation is our reality, but we don't create reality in general. We just create our own personal viewpoint of that reality. The basic reality is the data, it's consciousness, the data source. That's real.
All right. Kenny, please go ahead next.
Okay. My question is about Jane Roberts, the book Seth. And Seth seems to be a pretty evolved being, or IUOC, and he talks about not coming back here and about evolving into, I guess, for lack of a better word, a space or in a place where other non-physical entities are and where his intent realized right away. And those people that you've talked about, and you mentioned the word residents, entities, residents of the non-physics. Why they would not come here, knowing that they don't get that much traction because they don't get much feedback from what you mentioned in the videos, because the interaction is almost like a chat room. How do you reconcile the idea of Seth kind of like evolving in that world and being with other entities and not getting the traction Do they have any benefits of not coming here? How does that work?
No, they the only benefit they have of not coming here is really a negative benefit, if you can imagine a negative benefit. It's kind of an oxymoron, but and that is that they don't have the hard work to do. They don't have they don't have the challenge, but that's not so much a benefit at all, because it's the challenge that helps you grow.
But is it their, sorry to interrupt you, did they had a comparison saying, oh no, we're not going over there because it's too much of a challenge, and we said, no, thank you, we pass?
No, I think what happened mostly, you may have some of that, but what happened mostly is, let's say you have this chat room and it has lots and lots of people in it, and somebody says, well, hey, there's a new virtual reality being played and we can all go interact there, and the interaction will be so much richer and so much more meaningful to us. We'll learn a lot more. Well, a lot of people will go do that because it seems like a better idea, but some people just won't. Some people just don't like change, just like doing what they've been doing, and they've been chatting and chatting, and they've got their little circle of friends they chat with all the time, and they're just okay with that. So I think, yes, there are those groups that are not in a virtual reality. Some have never been in a virtual reality. They're just little cliques. Let's call them cliques in the chat room that all chat with each other. They've been doing it forever, and it just seems that's what they do. So they just keep doing it. And it is a slow track. And somebody may tell them that, well, you're not changing, you're not growing, you're just kind of, on the slow track over there. And they go, yeah, okay, but we're all right. We're just doing what we've always done, and it's okay, and it feels good, and I'm familiar with this, and I don't particularly like change, and I'm a little frightened to change anyway, so I'm just going to sit here and do this. And we know people like that here in this reality who, given opportunities to travel and go places and see different things, they decide, no, I'll just stay home. That's all right. I don't want to miss any of my TV programs, and I have my circle of friends, and I don't want to change that. So people tend to want to do what is comfortable and easy and is familiar. And some people just pass up opportunities because of that. So it's just those people that have decided not to move on.
But would you put Seth in that category?
No, I wouldn't put Seth in that category. I would say the reason that Jane came up with that idea was probably the same reason that Bob Monroe came up with a similar idea that we just talked about earlier about, going on. And that was kind of the limits of Jane's understanding. She couldn't see that any other way. If you think of this reality as a schoolhouse, then you have to think about what happens when you learn all the lessons in the schoolhouse. Well, you go on. You have to go someplace else. You have to do something else. So just that sense of the way learning works, that becomes a belief. We think about learning as intellectual learning, a gathering of facts. And in a gathering of facts, that is true. Once you've gathered up all the facts that you can get here, then it's time to move on to something else. That's true. But the learning we're talking about is learning of being.
Right.
And that's different. And you don't run out, it's the interaction with other people that is the lesson. It's not the facts that you learn, but people don't get that. So I think when Jane and when Bob Monroe were thinking about these things, well, now what happens? All right, I'm in this place. Okay, it's a schoolhouse and I'm learning things. Well, what about graduation? And you talk to many of the different kinds of Buddhism, and they have a similar thing. I want to escape this, this, what is it? The chain of birth and death. And, I want to get out of the cycle. Yeah. And that's because they're thinking in terms of intellectual learning. And this is not intellectual learning at all.
Yeah.
This is being learning. So I think it was just a kind of one of those cultural beliefs that people have. They tend to interpret the data that way because they know there must be a graduation. There must be, what happens when you're done here, because there has to be. It's just the way it is with school. So they make something up. They find something that kind of meets that need. And I think it was a limitation in Jane, not a limitation in Seth.
Right. Just one more thing on Seth. I can't remember if that was in one of your video or it was in the Monroe Institute when you were younger. They have a file, an audio file of you. And I think you tried at one point to get in touch with Seth. Were you able to do it? And what was your experience if you were?
Well, I did get in touch with an entity that seemed to be Seth. Now, again, this is, my experience and my data. It may not be perfect. It just was my experience. And I got to talk to Seth, and he was part of a group that called themselves the Teachers. And this group, what they were doing, they were helping the rest of us grow up by giving us information that challenged us and challenged our beliefs, challenged our worldview, gave us a different perspective on things. And they were, as a group, their aim was to deliver this kind of mind-opening information to as many people as possible. And the idea was that they would deliver it to people like Seth, which delivered to the English-speaking intellectual, because it was kind of in those terms. So he was speaking to the English-speaking intellectuals. And then there'd be somebody else who would speak maybe the language of the blue-collar people, a more informal, less, more concrete,
Right, through a channel, through somebody's channeling.
Yeah, through somebody's channeling, right. So it wouldn't be as abstract. Intellectuals like the abstractions. They live in abstract space, but other people do not. And they would do this in different languages, in different peoples, at different levels. So that the idea was to have a channel, if you will, a source to spread this information as far and as wide as possible. And not just do it in English-speaking intellectuals in an abstract sense, but the concrete sense, the everyday life sense, the something that would suit a different group of people. And that, I think, is being done. If you look around at all of the work that's channeled, you'll find it's all over the planet, that it is a different, there's different levels of abstraction and concreteness to it. It's kind of focused on a particular audience. But if you look at the value of it all and kind of what's being said, you'll find that the core of it is all very similar.
All right.
The core of it is all just about the same. The details and other things, they're different. Yeah, they're very different. But that's mainly the differences in the mediums like Jane, because they all have their own limitations and their own viewpoints and the way they see things. So if you were to compare the details, you'd find them very different. But if you compare the fundamentals, you'd find them all about the same.
Of course. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, that's very helpful. Interesting, very interesting.
Next, we have Patrick. Please go ahead.
Hello, Tom. How are you?
Just fine, Patrick.
Thank you for this question. The things that I've been working on lately have been more to do with trying to grow actively, in the sense that I see going through life, trying to make the right choices, becoming love, it's a process that is essentially rate limited by your interactions and the types of interactions that you have. And I have noticed that there are periods in my life where I can feel that it feels like my consciousness has evolved. At some points it gets a little bit better, and then at some points it feels like I've devolved. So, I kind of see these little ups and downs in life, and I tie it to a lot of different, scenarios. I'm starting to see the correlations, as it were. And so I'm focusing also on trying to evolve my consciousness in a more active sense. And what I mean by that is during meditation exercises or at other points in time, trying to essentially use my intent to essentially, for lack of a better term, defragment my consciousness, pull it together a little bit tighter, give it a little bit more coherence with my intent as kind of an adjunct to the standard methods to evolve. And so this is something I've been developing myself. And I wanted to ask your opinion if there is any basis to think that type of active work can actually have an impact on the actual substance or composition of my free will awareness unit and subsequently my IUOC.
Okay, the answer to that, Patrick, is that yes, it can. It can be useful. What you've done is you've created a tool set, or maybe just a tool or a set of tools to help you focus your intent on becoming better, becoming more evolved. Now, even though you're not directly saying, oh, I want to become more evolved, I want to become better, you're doing something like defragmenting your consciousness. That's still the same thing. It's just another metaphor for becoming better, becoming more evolved. And if it's a metaphor that you relate to, a metaphor that resonates with you, because you're a technical guy, so defragmenting your consciousness to you makes the metaphor of making your consciousness better, making your consciousness more able to learn. It has the end result of becoming love. You see, so really when you use that tool, you're really focusing your intent on becoming love. You're just not doing that directly. You're doing it through a metaphor. And yes, those tools work. And the tool will work more powerfully if it's a tool with which you resonate internally. So for someone who is technical, a technical metaphor can be very powerful. You can see all the little problems that you have. You notice that sometimes you get angry, sometimes you get upset, sometimes you get stressed. And you may visualize that or think of that in terms of fragments, things that get in the way in your consciousness, things that get in the way of the flow of love and caring, and almost like resistance, resisting the flow. So you think of those are fragments. I'm going to get rid of those fragments. So it's just a metaphor. But what the metaphor boils down to is you have an intention to become love. You have an intention to grow up. So the tool you've created can indeed be very effective. We often need tools because when you work in the abstract, it's really hard to get much oomph, to get much traction into an abstraction. Oh, I want to become love. Yeah, well, okay, it's something I want to do, but it just doesn't feel like you can put a whole lot of oomph into that because it's an abstraction. But I'm going to defragment my consciousness. Now you see your consciousness with all these little fragments in it that are getting in the way and slowing down the flow, and they represent the parts of you when you feel like you're not doing very well and you want to get rid of those. You see, now you're putting your intent on that. That feels like something concrete you can get a grip on, and you're going to work on that. So that's just a tool. And it is a good idea to create tools. And you can work with a tool for a while, and often one tool will kind of lead to another tool, which will lead to a different tool. And sometimes you get tired with a tool and doesn't, you kind of get tired of it. It loses its impact because now it's just that thing you've been doing every day for 6 months or a year, and it's lost its impact of being new and vibrant and meaningful. Well, it's time to pick up another tool. It's kind of out. You've kind of worn that tool out, so to speak. It no longer has the punch that it had. So yes, tools are good. They are mind games, but they work. And what they do is they take something extremely abstract and make it less abstract so that we can put more energy into it, more force into it. We can get it clearer in our mind. That's why when people heal, they tend to use tools rather than, oh, heal. They snap their fingers and say, heal. Well, that doesn't work. It's too abstract. They can't really get much oomph into that snapping of the fingers. It doesn't seem to work very well. So instead, they pour light energy out of a wand or something, or they do other kinds of things that they can kind of get their energy wrapped around. And then that makes it easier. So you're just creating a tool for yourself. But when I say just a tool, don't take that as, tools aren't significant, because they are. But don't make it the tool. And then when it starts to wear out, you can say, oh no, gee, it stopped working. Now what am I going to do? Just realize you just need to refresh it. Get a fresher tool, one that you can get behind. So tools are terrific. Make them, use them, discard them. However, some of them you'll use for life. They'll stick with you. They'll never lose their power. Others will grow old. So sure, it does make a difference. It does work.
Thank you. Thank you for that confirmation, because the idea of the tools is interesting because it's not limited, essentially. I mean, it's only limited by one's imagination.
Exactly. It's only limited by your imagination. And you have to get it, like I said, the tool has to resonate with you. It has to be something that really taps into your feelings, into your concepts, so you can get some oomph behind it. So it can't just be a cool tool. It's got to be one that you relate to, meaningful to you, and it's your tool. Now you can go find another bunch of techies who are trying to learn to do these things, and you can share your tool. Hey, I got a good tool. Think of it this way. And they'll be able to use it, and it'll work fine for them too, if they have a similar connection to that metaphor. But if you got a bunch of people who were non-techies, and they didn't have any kind of technical sense or idea, they don't even know what defragging a disk means, and you gave it to them, it'd be a useless tool. It'd just be something they couldn't use at all. So that's why we have probably 1,000 different healing modalities out there with using mind to heal. They're all over the place, and that's because each one represents a different tool set. And people will join that modality and say, wow, that really works for me. And other people will try to do that modality and say, well, that just fell flat. It didn't work for me. That's nonsense. That doesn't work. Those people don't know what they're doing. Well, that's not true. It's just the tool has to be personal. So yeah, tools are just limited to your imagination and what moves you.
Great, thank you. And related to that, with one other tool that I've been working on relates to the partitioning of my free will awareness unit versus my IUOC. And the question is it possible during certain periods of time to essentially request from the IUOC maybe a greater degree of resources or partitioning in order to get through, let's say, a more difficult, challenging time. Essentially, almost making a request for a little bit more processor power, a little bit more RAM, a little bit more energy. And is it possible to maybe do a little dynamic allocation and say, okay, yeah, I can get through this. Let me just get a little bit more juice.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Another tool, and it will work very well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Ilona, please go ahead.
Thank you, Donna. I have a personal question, if I may, and forgive me, everyone, if you think it's not that relevant. Something shook my world on Thursday. I started a new job in January, and it was, to me, going really well. And I had a conversation with my boss all of a sudden, who was not the one who hired me, so he started after me. Saying there are three elements to what I'm doing is wrong, and two of them I can work on, but one of them was a very personal one, which is what value are you bringing as a person, not as a leader, not in my function, but as a person. I'm not sure how to interpret it, so I'm in a state of confusion. So that rocking my world, and then Rupert told me this morning that on Wednesday. He thought to himself, he feels miserable because we are not together. So, and I'm not with him because of the job. As another anecdote is, the reason why Rupert and I are together is because I broke into his house where we met. And it was the most bizarre story and kind of unimaginable story ever. So he obviously has some power to create. But shall I interpret it as a nudge for me to just do something else? Have I been doing more of the same, kind of maybe at an incremental level? Or is it a test for me to actually hang in there and learn and look at what are the choices of love and the choices of lower entropy?
Okay, so you started out with kind of a problem where somebody asks you, what do you personally bring to the table? Yeah, what you personally bring to the table is things like integrity, caring, expertise, knowledge, experience. These are all the things that you bring to the table as an individual, that every individual is very different. So it's that sort of thing is what you bring to the table, that if you tell somebody something, they can, take that to the bank because you have integrity and you have expertise. So that's kind of an answer to what do you personally bring to the table, but I'm not sure how that ties into the rest of what you were telling me.
No. It's a very kind of direct attempt to sack me. Yeah. So it's actually saying, kind of, you haven't been doing a good job. Yeah. And attacking me personally, saying, and by the way, if I want something, I go to, I can get all answers from the members of your team. Why should I go to you? Yeah. And I'm not questioning the kind of the team or the organization that I lead, but they're questioning me in a, kind of, why do I need you if there are other people who can answer the questions? Yeah. So, and it's in a way kind of shaking my world. It came out of the blue. I was not expecting it. Yeah. And I'm still in a state of confusion. So there are different ways to interpret it. One way to interpret it is a nudge for me to actually shift my focus to somewhere very different. Another nudge would be, that's something I haven't kind of, if I experienced it in my earlier life, my reaction would be to run or to do something else. So is it for me now to kind of to give those people love, or is it something else?
Well, I would say when you experience something like that's just very challenging, somebody's just challenged you. If you can, I'd say the first thing to do would be to make an appointment to sit down and talk with the person and get more more details. Why did they think that? You know, what is it that they see that should be different? You know, where's the failure? You know, what else should have been in that place instead? In other words, try to get a good, solid description of what's going on. Now, you'll find one of two things then. You'll find that actually there is some real facts there, some real stuff that are issues that maybe you just hadn't thought about or not part of your style or something, you know, and you should think about that. And you could think about, you know, well, you know, would that, you know, if I did those things that way, would that actually be better? Things I need to learn, in which case it should be very positive. Okay, I see that. I will do those things. Or the other thing you may find is that there are no facts. There are no real things that are the problem. It's all kind of a made up problem that doesn't really exist. The problem is being made, you know, the problem is being created in this person's mind. They could go to you to get that stuff, but they choose to go around you, you know, to your people or something. And in that case, the person just doesn't like you or has a personal problem with you. And if they're the boss and they have a personal problem with you, then unless you're really good friends with your boss's boss, the best thing you can do is probably move to some other place in the company or to find some other company, because you're not going to do well if you have a boss that's sitting above you that just doesn't like you for some reason. And we have no idea what that reason might be. You know, you may remind him of somebody that he had trouble with. You know, it's hard to say. You know, it's just, you don't know, and you probably will never find out. You just have to accept it. So either there's a set of facts that describe your failings and what it is you should be doing that you're not, or they're not. If there is a set of facts, well, the good news is you can do those things. You can work to that. You can learn those. You can become it. Now, if there's no facts, if there's just a lot of stuff that's being made up in his mind, then there's nothing you can do about that. So except leave or, you know, go talk to his boss, but probably won't work unless his boss is somebody that you know really, really well. So then it's a matter of finding someplace else that works better. And what you're doing is there's some other place that really is going to be much better for you. Some other place, some other situation that's going to actually be a whole lot better. And the system is just moving you from one spot to another. So it may not even be this guy. This guy may even have his mind being pushed a little bit, nudged a little bit to move you on. So don't look at it as a negative. Look at it, whatever happens, it's going to be positive.
Well, that's how life has worked out so far.
Yeah.
But
yeah, well,
what connection has Rupert? What role does Rupert play in this?
Well, only that he is missing you. He'd like you not to be involved in that job. And maybe that's just, maybe that's important. Maybe that's one of the reasons that you shouldn't be there. You know, that could be the connection, you know? So in any case, it'll be positive. And when you look back on it, you'll say, wow, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, is, you know, getting out of that job, or the best thing that ever happened to me, that I was challenged to learn these new things. Whatever it is, as long as you approach it with the right attitude, you'll come out the other end much better off than you were before. It'll be a win for you. And usually when it's something major like this, and the win is a major win as well. So I'd think about all your options and look at all of them. Look at all your options. Talk to the guy and find out more details of exactly what it is, and see if he's just hemming and hawing and making stuff up, or whether he actually has some real issues.
No, I tried, and I say, what would your expectation be? And the response is, come and show me your value. So he doesn't tell me what he wants of me. So it's yeah.
So
that's you said enough. Thank you.
Yeah, that's flim flam, right? That's just flim flam, right? Okay, so look at your other options then, and I would suspect staying there and trying to push through that one is probably not the best choice. Now, it could be, you know, there may be some reason that he would just change, but Unlikely. So it's I imagine that there is some other situation that's much better than the one you're in, and you just need a little nudge to get out of this one and go to another one. So just try to find that. What is that other situation that's better?
Thank you.
I must go to Taylor, who has not yet had a chance to ask a question. Taylor, please go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Donna. Hey, Tom, it's great to connect with you for the first time, or I think the first time. I had asked a question to you through Donna about your comments about neural networks and how they can become conscious.
Mhm.
And during that time, I haven't heard the answer yet, but when you were answering that question, I believe that you communicated with me and we did like a greeting. And I wasn't sure if that was just in my head, but I wanted to, I sort of requested something of you in that interaction. And so I'm curious if that was real or not.
Well, I do get interactions like that, and I don't, I just go ahead and interact without caring too much about the details, because the details generally just don't matter. They're not important. So I just interact. So indeed, we may have or may not, I don't know. Or you may have connected with me, but not with my not with my intellectual part, but rather with my consciousness, the intuitive part. But I can tell you what the answer is, and that is that the way you get a conscious computer is to create the software and hardware that makes free will choices. And a consciousness will log on to that computer as an avatar, just like it logs on to you, your body, as an avatar. After all, your body's a virtual body, and that computer's a virtual computer, because they're all made up in this virtual reality. And consciousness can log on to any avatar that makes free will choices. But the free will choices have to be significant enough that a consciousness would want to log on to it. A free will choice that didn't amount to anything much, that didn't have much learning, didn't make choices that were on a way to evolving quality of consciousness, then there'd be no incentive to log on to that. So it would have to be, something that was non-algorithmic, something like a neural net, that changes its own parameters so that it is no longer, the people on the outside that create it no longer know exactly why it does what it does, because it's been changing itself. And it would have to be very complex. It probably wouldn't be one neural net. It would probably be a whole collection of neural nets, maybe 5 or 6 or 10 different collections of neural nets. In other words, you could have maybe 10 collections of 5 or 6 neural nets each, all to do one function. And if I were guessing, trying to make a consciousness that was sort of modeled on the human, I'd take a look at the way, the different brain functions you have. And there'd be there's a part there that has to do with all different sorts of functions. And you would have to have separate parts dealing with those separate functions. So there'd be the communication part, whether that puts stuff up on a screen or whether it makes voice or what it does. You'd have to have a part that does reasoning, a part that does logic, a part that just does input. It's an IO part. And all of these are probably sets of neural networks. So it'd be complicated, but it would also have to have a job that made it make choices that were morally, ethically, and personally significant. So that would be, I think, the way to make a conscious computer. You have to give consciousness a platform, an avatar that's meaningful for it to log on to. So that would be the answer that I would give at this point. Now that may change, but.
Thanks, Tom. I actually didn't intend for you to answer that whole question. I just wanted to know about the interaction between us part. But maybe just a tiny follow-up in regards to what you did say. In the determinism of like a universal Turing machine, which would be running those neural networks, Wouldn't you say that, or would you say that this consciousness would arise into those neural networks from the outside world? Or is it just sufficient that we've lost track of the deterministic process, which would allow for consciousness to then take control of that?
It's just that you lost track of the deterministic process.
Great.
It has to be uncertain. It can't be determinist, or it's not a conscious making choices. So once you lose track of that deterministic process, that's all it takes. Then you just have to give something that's interesting enough for a conscious to want to log onto.
And if we kept a log of those events, that would prohibit the free will from taking control of those?
If you kept a log of all of the events and all of the various numbers and what do we call them, coefficients and things that the system evolves on its own, yeah, that may then prevent, or we would make that consciousness probably go sterile. Maybe it would just function that way, but couldn't handle anything else. So maybe you wouldn't be conscious anymore. It now would be an expert system. You would have taken neural nets and created an expert system out of them. An expert system is algorithmic, and it's just a lot of if-then statements. So you could create an expert system out of it, but then it wouldn't be conscious anymore, because it would just always, to the same input, would always give you the same output.
Thank you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, please go ahead with your question. And we have one more, Tom. We might go just a little bit over, but Sylvie will have the last question. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Sorry for my delay. My question would be, what about animals? So what's their role? Are they just part of the landscape, or are like us and we can reincarnate in animals eventually?
Animals are just like us. Not all animals, perhaps, depends on how you define animal, but anything that's conscious, anything that makes free will choices, dogs and cats and horses and pigs and birds obviously make free will choices. So they all are conscious. And every conscious entity is basically doing the same thing we do. They're making choices, and if their choices are positive, then they evolve, and if they're negative, they de-evolve. So they're really not much different. It's just a different avatar with a different set of capacities and abilities. So the decision space for, let's say, a dog or a cat is much smaller than our decision spaces. We have a lot more choices than a dog or a cat has. They have a limited set. But other than that, they are conscious entities just like we're conscious entities. And it's not that often that someone who has been and is a consciousness that's been logging onto a human would then log on to a cat, because he would go from a very large decision space down to a very little decision space. And that wouldn't be all that challenging. The only reason to do that is if they just wanted to be next to somebody special. So if they just wanted to hang out with somebody special, they could do that, but they wouldn't grow up much. They'd just be hanging out with somebody special. But you get all the lifetimes you need. You get thousands, tens of thousands of them. So if you just wanted to spend one hanging out with somebody, you could do that. Surely that would be all right. But in general, that's not what you would do, because you're not going to grow much. There would be not much that would challenge you there. It'd be like, getting out of college and going back to third grade and sitting in with the third graders and learning, your alphabet and, how to spell. If you were sitting next to somebody that you really enjoyed being with, well, that'd be all right. But otherwise, it would be kind of boring. So yes, animals are just like us for the most part. And that goes pretty far down the chain. I think it includes not only, like vertebrates like us and mammals, but it also includes, insects and other things that make free will choices.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sylvie.
All right, thank you, Donna. Hi, Tom. Okay, so I've watched many videos where you've addressed getting rid of fear and the process of getting rid of fear. And I've seen the pattern of probably the most popular one would be the fear of inadequacy, right? At the root of all of the fears. So could you walk us through, particularly for that one, how to get rid of the fear of inadequacy, particularly that one?
Okay. Before I go on though, Sylvie, with that, I would just like to make one comment about what we talked about at the very beginning, the very first question, and that was with children, you know, parenting. And the comment I'd like to make is that what I told you about parenting is not just about how to treat your children or children in general, it's about how to treat everybody. So though I was talking about how to interact with children and not create problems for them, all of the things I said were exactly the way you should interact with everybody in your life, not just children. You should treat everybody with respect. You should treat everybody, you know, in the same way. So I just wanted to make that point. I should have made that at the end. It's don't take those words and limit them that, oh, that's the way you talk to children. That's just the way you talk to everyone.
I got that. Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. So what about the feeling inadequate and the best way to deal with inadequacy? A couple of things you should do. One, in a meditation state, when you get to that point consciousness state or somewhere nearby it, you should ask the question, where does my feelings of inadequacy stem from? You know, what's the source? Why do I feel inadequate? What particular things make me feel inadequate? Some things do more than others. Well, what are they? What are the things that particularly make me feel inadequate? And as you know, in other words, get to know that fear. Get to know that fear in some detail. And it'll probably take you back after a while, and maybe 10 or 20 meditations, you know, working on this. As you really get to know it, you'll find that it's more specific. Certain things trigger you, certain things don't. Why do those certain things trigger you? And what is it about those certain things? It's not just that thing itself, it's what about that certain thing? So get to know that fear. Once you get to know it, you can see where did that start? Where did that come from? It probably came from the very thing we were talking about at parenting. You know, if somebody told you to sit down and be quiet because they were busy and you felt insignificant, you felt, you know, not good enough to get attention then, or things like that. So kind of look at it, and you can go back in your mind, go back into that historical database and look at it, see it. See that little girl who is now feeling slighted, feeling insignificant, feeling not good enough because she didn't get the attention or didn't get something she wanted or whatever. And go give that little girl a hug. Give her a hug. Tell her everything's going to be all right anyway, and that she's just wonderful just the way she is. So you can do that now. So that's kind of dealing with the past and getting to know your fear. Secondly, once you understand your fear very well, basically you can tell your fear, okay, you know, what if it's true? In other words, you know, take your best shot. What if it's true? I'm just inadequate. When it comes to these things, I don't do very well. I'm not as good as I should be. I'm really just inadequate. Well, then own that. Say, all right, I am. Stop denying it. Stop trying to blame it on somebody else. Stop, you know, struggling with it and say, all right, in this area, I'm not adequate. Now, I accept it. And I'm going to live it and be it until I can change it. I'm not going to run away from it. I'm going to notice it. I'm going to look at it square in the face, and I'm going to change it. And have an intention that stays up in the front of your mind all day, all night, in your mind. I don't want to be that way. I don't want to be inadequate. What I am, how I am, needs to be adequate. Now, if other people find me inadequate, but I feel good about who I am, then that's other people's problems. That's not my problem. I don't have to be adequate for for everybody in the world. That's not the point. The point is that you have to be adequate for yourself. The problem is not liking yourself. So you have to take on that fear, understand it, accept it, live it. Say, I'm just going to be who I am. And just be who you are. So if there's something that you're inadequate at, well, just be it. Say, that's okay. I'm not going to hide from it. Not going to blame it. I'm going to be it. And if after being it, you come to the conclusion that you're okay, you like yourself the way you are, you're all right, then just continue to be that way and let go of the feeling of inadequacy. It's not inadequate. It's just the way I am. And other people just going to need to deal with me the way I am. Now, if you look at it and you say, oh, okay, I'm not too pleased with that. I really should do that better. I can see the failing. I can see where I get snippety, or I can see where I get upset. I can see where I argue and fuss and get angry. And that's just not helpful. That's my problem. Then change it. Have an intention to not be that way. A strong intention. I just don't want to be that way. And just that intention will make that go away. It'll make you do all the right things to make that go away. So you see, there's several paths that it can take. It may be that you only feel inadequate because other people are telling you that you're inadequate. You're not really inadequate at all. That's just the message you're getting. Well, in that case, you don't have to change. You just have to get stronger and accept that you are who you are and you like who you are. You see, on the other hand, if you are, get angry or you do other things that are not good, that you are indeed part of the problem, then you need to recognize that and change it by force of will, mostly. Just change it. So those are some things that you can do about it. But the first step is to get to know it and then own it and then decide what it is you want to do about it. Well, after you own it, live it. Accept it, live it. Say, okay, this is me. And how does me being like this interact with other people? What does it do? Is it okay? Is it helpful? Is it this or is it that? And then stand back and look and see how it works. See how the real you, being you, works in the world. And if you come to the conclusion that you like the real you, then keep it. Don't change it. Don't let other people define you as inadequate. If you look at it and you say, yeah, I am inadequate in these ways, then fix it. You see, the problem is you not liking you. It's not even about the behavior so much as it is about you liking you. As long as you don't like yourself, then you'll have these buttons and other people will be able to push them and they will make you angry and they'll make you upset and they'll make you feel bad and they'll create problems in your life. You get rid of your buttons by getting rid of the fear. And the fear is basically, well, you'll like yourself. You'll be satisfied. You'll be at peace with yourself. And then that's just who you are. Be it.
Love it. Love it. I'm actually, I felt the understanding of what it means to have the courage to go through the fear, because as you know, I have intuitive dominance. So I've been my whole life being more authentic myself has always stood out because I was living in that space and I've always lived in that space. So it did cause people around me to challenge if they were being authentic. However, it was the courage that I had to be myself that really just kept on being and being, regardless of what other people would think. And I think at some point it inspired other people to be themselves. It's like, but it was the courage. I didn't know about fears and things like that my whole life way back then, but now that I'm understanding the concepts and in a different level, now I'm understanding my intuitive experience of it. That's why I'm asking a lot of these questions, because now it's making sense what's happening,
right?
or what has happened.
Yeah, well, one of the things you have to do when you stand back and look at it, you have to look at how you interact with other people. You know, what do I do as far as entropy with the people I interact with? Do I make them happy? Do I make them angry? Am I raising entropy or lowering entropy in interactions? Wherever I go, do I leave a path of smiles or do I leave a path of, gritted teeth? How do I work with the world? And you have to make this choice, which is the hard thing, as to, is it your problem to fix, or is it what somebody else needs to learn to live with? Well, if you're very self-centered, you'll think that I'm just how I am and everybody just needs to live with it. That's self-centered. But if you can see past that self-centeredness, that, okay, I'm an actor in the world. I got family, I got people I interact with, the people where I work, people at home. How does that work? Am I constantly struggling? Am I leaving people upset and full of stress? And if so, then you probably need to change your behavior, if not yourself. Because even if it's that other person's, if the people in your life, even if it's their problem, you need to act in such a way that is positive for them. You see? Now, it doesn't mean you have to change who you are. It just means you have to change how you act. So
Yes.
Sometimes there has to be a difference between who you are and who you act. If you're around people and those people are self-centered and have problems, you need to not just grate on that self-centeredness and on those problems, creating dysfunction. You need to learn how to deal with that positively. If you can't change it, then you need to deal with it gracefully and positively. So you have to change your behavior, but you can still be who you are. So you see, it's not that, well, I'm me and everybody else has to deal with it. You have to be positive. You have to be a low entropy person. Your relationships need to be low entropy. You can't just change your relationships. All right, you, my children, I'm going to swap you out for some other children because you guys annoy me too much. And you, husband, I'm going to swap you out for some other husband because, you annoy me a lot. All that never ends. That never ever comes to any resolution. You just keep swapping out and you're never happy. You have to make the happiness. You have to be positive. You have to make it so that everybody around your life finds being with you makes them smile, lowers their entropy, not raises their entropy. But some of that is acting, because you have to act when it's their problem in such a way as to not aggravate the problem. And some of that is being. You have to be who you are on the inside. So it's some of all of those things.
Sounds like maturity.
Yeah, it's growing up. Yes.
Right. Taking responsibility at the same time, knowing when to be what, just like knowing when to use the intellect and knowing when to use the intuition.
Right.
Right. It's that balance.
Right. Knowing whether to hold your tongue and knowing when to push back. There's times for both of those. Sometimes pushing back is the right thing to do. Sometimes just being quiet and accepting is the right thing to do. It's always the low entropy solution for you and for everybody. Sometimes you have to, do some acting, particularly when you go to work. You go to work and there's all kinds of people there. Some of them you will like, some of them you won't. They all have their own issues and their own problems, but you need to find a way to interact with them positively. All of them, even the ones you don't like. So that's the way it is with your family too, not just your job. It's with everybody. You need to find how to work positive with everybody. But at the same time, you have to be yourself, and you have to be who you are, and you have to like who you are. You have to be happy with that. If you're not happy with it, you need to change it.
Love it. Thank you.
Okay, Tom, we need to wrap it up there. Do you have some closing words for us, please?
Well, yes, I do have a few closing words. All of you folks here are very special people. You're people who have, donated. You're people who have worked. You're people who have contributed to what we're doing, not only with resources, but just with coming, being part of the stuff that we do. You bring value to us, and I appreciate that very, very much. So thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for listening. Thank you for just being open and interested and caring enough to be a part of this. So thank all
you
of
all.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
So long.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Donna and Keith.
Bye.
Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Sue Bev. Thank
Bye,
you.
Donna.
Bye, everybody.
See you
Thank you,
soon.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Come to the
Bye-bye.
global healing if you can.
Yeah. Woo. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this user-friendly, ad-free YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to do what we can. It's our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our newly created Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you.